Straight up. Welcome back to Way Happy Bible Study. Glory to God. Let's get into it. We are entering Genesis chapter 32, starting at verse 1. We're talking about Jacob, and in our last chapter, Jacob and Laban had parted ways. And Laban, he felt like, those were his daughters were Jacob's wives, but they were his daughters. And the children that they bear were his children, he felt like. But he had to let, God intervened, and he had to let Jacob leave. Now, in chapter 32, verse 1, and Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? The angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, "This is God's host." And he called the name of that place Mahanaim. In verse 3, and Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau his brother, unto the land of Seir, the country of Edom. Now that's current day Jordan. And remember, when Jacob left Esau, Esau wanted to kill him for taking his blessing and his birthright. And so Jacob is kind of leery about going back. He's afraid that Esau is going to kill him, kill his family, take all of his animals. He just doesn't know what to expect from Esau, because the last time he saw him, Esau wanted to kill him. So in verse 4, and he commanded them, saying, "Thus shall ye speak unto my lord Esau." So Jacob is sending people ahead, and he's telling them, he sent messengers before him to his brother, and he commanded them, saying, "Thus shall ye speak unto my lord Esau. Thy servant Jacob saith thus." Notice how he's setting this up. He's humbling himself. He is the one who received the blessing and the birthright, but he is using his words very strategically here. "Thus shall you speak unto my lord Esau, thy servant Jacob." Now see, he believes that if his messengers approach his brother saying, "Thy servant Jacob," sends this message, that Esau, his anger will be subsided. And it's the same lesson we were talking about earlier. Those who humble themselves will be exalted. Those who exalt themselves will be humbled. If Jacob went back to Esau saying, "I'm the boss and you're my servant," Esau would just kill him. And instead, if he comes saying, "Thy servant Jacob," then that squashes the anger. Okay? Those who humble themselves will be exalted. Those who exalt themselves will be humbled. "Thy servant Jacob saith thus, I have sojourned with Laban and stayed there until now. And I have oxen and asses, flocks and men servants and women servants, and I have sent to tell my Lord that I may find grace in thy sight. He's humbling himself, calling him his Lord, and also hoping for grace in the sight of his brother Esau. In verse 6, and the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, we came to thy brother Esau, and also he cometh to meet thee, and 400 men with him. And Jacob's going, In verse 7, then Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed. He's like, he's coming to kill us all. And he divided the people that was with him, and the flocks and herds and the camels, into 2 bands. He's hoping that if Esau wipes out one of them, that the other ones will survive. In verse 8, and said, if Esau come to the one company and smite it, then the other company which is left shall escape. In verse 9, and Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham, he's praying, and God of my father Isaac, the Lord which said unto me, return unto thy country and to thy kindred, and I will deal well with thee. See, God is the one that told him to return. I am not worthy of the least of all the mercies. He's humbling himself before God. And of all the truth which thou hast showed unto thy servant. For with my staff I passed over this Jordan, and now I am become 2 bands. Deliver me, I pray thee, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau. For I fear him, lest he will come and smite me, and the mother with the children. He's worried that Esau's going to wipe out not just him, but also his wives and his children and his servants. In verse 12, and thou saidst, I will surely do thee good, and thou saidst, I will surely do thee good, and make thy seed as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. And he lodged there that same night, and took of that which came to his hand a present for Esau his brother, 200 she-goats, and 20 he-goats, 200 ewes, and 20 rams, 30 milch camels with their colts, 40 kine, and 10 bulls, 20 she-asses, and 10 foals. So this is his offering to his brother, a gift. And he delivered them into the hand of his servants, every drove by themselves, and said unto his servants, pass over before me, and put a space betwixt drove and drove. And he commanded the foremost, saying, when Esau my brother meeteth thee, and asketh thee, saying, whose art thou, and whither goest thou, and whose are these before thee? Then thou shalt say, they be thy servant Jacob's. It is a present sent unto my lord Esau, and behold, also he is behind us. And so commanded he the second and the third, and all that followed the droves, saying, on this manner shall ye speak unto Esau when ye find him. In verse 20, and say ye moreover, behold, thy servant Jacob is behind us. Thy servant Jacob. See, he's humbling himself. For he said, I will appease him with the present. Because this is a pretty hefty present. I mean, that's a lot of animals, and animals are wealth. So he says, for he said, I will appease him with the present that goeth before me, and afterward I will see his face. Peradventure he will accept of me. In verse 21, so went the present over before him, and himself lodged that night in the company. In verse 22, and he rose up that night and took his 2 wives and his 2 women servants and his 11 sons and passed over the ford Jabbok. This is before Benjamin was born, so he has a son, 11 sons, and he ends up with 12. In verse 23, and he took them and sent them over the brook and sent over that he had. In verse 24, and Jacob was left alone, and there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of the day. This was the angel of the Lord he's wrestling with. In verse 25, and when he saw that he prevailed not against him, he touched the hollow of his thigh. So this is an angel, the angel of the Lord, actually. And there he wrestled a man with him until the breaking of the day. And when he saw that he prevailed not against him, he touched the hollow of his thigh. And the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint as he wrestled with him. In verse 26, and he said, let me go. This is the angel of the Lord saying this. And he said, let me go, for the day breaketh. And he said, I will not let thee go, except thou bless me. In verse 27, and he said unto him, what is thy name? And he said, Jacob. And he said, thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. For as a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed. In verse 29, and Jacob asked him and said, tell me, I pray thee, thy name. And he said, wherefore is it that thou dost ask after my name? And he blessed him there. So he's saying, why are you asking my name? You know my name. It was God, okay? And he blessed him there. In verse 30, and Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. So now we're told that this was God he was wrestling with, and he would not let go. And so God touched his thigh and took it out of joint to get him to let go. In verse 31, and as he passed over Penuel, the sun rose up upon him, and he halted upon his thigh. His thigh hurt him for the rest of his life. In verse 32, therefore the children of Israel eat not of the sinew which shrank, which is upon the hollow of the thigh, unto this day. That's a custom among the Jews. Because he touched the hollow of Jacob's thigh in the sinew that shrank. Let's go on into chapter 33. In verse 1, and Jacob lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, Esau came. Oh, it's going to get exciting now. And with him 400 men. That's got to be a fearful sight, considering Esau wanted to kill him the last time he saw him. And he divided the children unto Leah and unto Rachel and unto the 2 handmaids. And he put the handmaids and their children foremost out in the front. And Leah and her children after that. And Rachel and Joseph in the hindermost to protect them. They were the most precious to him. In verse 3, and he passed over before them and bowed himself to the ground 7 times until he came near to his brother. So as he's approaching, Esau can see Jacob approaching. He stops 7 times and bows himself down as a sign that he is in a position of submission to his brother. In verse 4, and Esau ran to meet him and embraced him. And fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. So Jacob was scared to death, but Esau seems to be truly glad to see him. Those who humble themselves will be exalted, and those who exalt themselves will be humbled. In verse 5, and he lifted up his eyes and saw the women and the children, and said, Who are those with thee? And he said, The children which God hath graciously given thy servant. In verse 6, then the handmaidens came near, they and their children, and they bowed themselves. In verse 7, and Leah also with her children came near and bowed themselves. And after came Joseph near and Rachel, and they bowed themselves. And he said, What meanest thou by all this drove which I met? And he said, These are to find grace in the sight of my Lord. In verse 9, and Esau said, I have enough, my brother, keep that thou hast unto thyself. In verse 10, and Jacob said, Nay, I pray thee, if now I have found grace in thy sight, then receive my present at my hand. For therefore I have seen thy face, as though I had seen the face of God, and thou wast pleased with me. It was Jacob, he was scared to death that Esau was still angry and would kill him as soon as he saw him. In verse 11, take, I pray thee, my blessing that is brought to thee, because God hath dealt graciously with me, and because I have enough. And he urged him, and he took it. In verse 12, and he said, Let us take our journey, and let us go, and I will go before thee. And he said unto him, My Lord knoweth that the children are tender, means they're young and vulnerable, and it's hard for them to travel. And the flocks and herds with young are with me. And if men should overdrive them one day, all the flock will die. Let my Lord, I pray thee, pass over before his servant. And I will lead on softly, according as the cattle that goeth before me, and the children be able to endure, until I come unto my Lord, unto Seir. In verse 15 of Genesis chapter 33, and Esau said, Let me now leave with thee some of the folk that are with me. And he said, What needeth it? Let me find grace in the sight of my Lord. In verse 16, so Esau returned that day on his way unto Seir. In verse 17, and Jacob journeyed to Succoth, and built him a house, and made booths for his cattle, and therefore the name of the place is called Succoth. In verse 18, and Jacob came to Shalem, a city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, when he came from Padan Aram, and pitched his tent before the city. And he bought a parcel of a field where he had spread his tent at the hand of the children of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pieces of money. And he erected there an altar, and he called it El Elohe Israel. Chapter 34. Let's go straight into it. And Dinah, the daughter of Leah, which she bare unto Jacob, this was Jacob's only daughter, Dinah, went out to see the daughters of the land. And when Shechem, the son of Hamor, the Hivite, prince of the country, saw her, he took her and lay with her and defiled her. He raped her. In verse 3, and his soul clave unto Dinah. He means he loved her. He wanted her. He took her against her will, but he just wanted her so bad that he didn't control himself. So his soul is cleaving unto Dinah. she, he loved her and wanted to marry her. Okay. His soul clave unto Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, and he loved the damsel, and spake kindly unto the damsel. And Shechem spake unto his father Hamor, saying, Get me this damsel to wife. He wants to take her as his wife. And Jacob heard that he had defiled Dinah his daughter. Now his sons were with his cattle in the field. And Jacob held his peace until they were come. And Hamor, the father of Shechem, went out unto Jacob to commune with him. And the sons of Jacob came out of the field when they heard it. And the men were grieved because they were very wroth. Oh, they were furious because he had wrought folly in Israel in lying with Jacob's daughter, which thing ought not to be done. And Hamor communed with them, saying, The soul of my son Shechem longeth for your daughter. I pray you give her him to wife. And make ye marriages with us, and give your daughters unto us, and take our daughters unto you. And ye shall dwell with us, and the land shall be before you. Dwell and trade ye therein, and get you possessions therein. And Shechem said unto her father and unto her brethren, Let me find grace in your eyes, and what ye shall say unto me, I will give. In verse 12, Ask me never so much dowry and gift, and I will give according as ye shall say unto me. But give me the damsel to wife. In verse 13, And the sons of Jacob answered Shechem and Hamor, his father, deceitfully. So notice the sons of Jacob answered him and his father deceitfully, and said, Because he had defiled Dinah their sister. In verse 14, And they said unto them, We cannot do this thing, to give our sister to one that is uncircumcised, for that were a reproach unto us. In verse 15, But in this will we consent unto you, if ye will be as we be, that every male of you be circumcised. In verse 16, Then will we give our daughters unto you, and we will take your daughters to us, and we will dwell with you, and we will become one people. But they're being deceptive. The sons of Jacob are being deceptive because they're furious. They want to kill this guy. In verse 17, But if ye will not hearken unto us to be circumcised, then we will take our daughter, and we will be gone. And their words pleased Hamor and Shechem, Hamor's son. And the young man deferred not to do the thing, because he had delight in Jacob's daughter. And he was more honorable than all the house of his father. He's a rapist, but he's more honorable than all the house of his father. Oh, no, that's kind of questionable, isn't it? And Hamor and Shechem his son came unto the gate of their city, and communed with the men of their city, saying, These men are peaceable with us. Therefore let them dwell in the land, and trade therein for the land, and behold, it is large enough for them. Let us take their daughters to us for wives, and let us give them our daughters. Only herein will the men consent unto us for to dwell with us, to be one people, if every male among us be circumcised as they are circumcised. shall not their cattle and their substance and every beast of theirs be ours? So the king is trying to talk his people into agreeing with this. Only let us consent with them, and they will dwell with us. In verse 24, and unto Hamor and unto Shechem his son hearkened all that went out of the gate of his city. And every male was circumcised, all that went out of the gate of his city. In verse 25, and it came to pass on the third day, when they were sore, that two of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brethren, took each man his sword and came upon the city boldly and slew all the males. So they deceived them all into getting circumcised. They all got circumcised in the same day. And once a man is circumcised, he's sore and he's weak. He's weak and he's sore. So he's not up to his strength in fighting. And so they weakened them all through circumcision in this deception. And they went in, these two, Simeon and Levi, went into the city and just killed them all. Oh, wow, we're out of time. This has really been an amazing evening. It hasn't. We're going to, should the Lord tarry, we will have another Way Happy Bible study tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Central is when we usually start. I love you guys. Thanks for studying with me tonight. May God bless you. Should the Lord tarry. Straight up.